It was just past 8 in the morning when Mrs. Carter took attendance in room 14, her voice steady, but her mind half distracted, the way it always was during the first period. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the smell of dry erase markers mixing with the faint sweetness of someone's leftover breakfast muffin. "Marcus Hill," she called, scanning her list. Silence. She glanced up from the clipboard, letting her eyes wander toward the back row. His desk was empty. Again. The second time this week. Mrs. Carter's lips pressed into a thin line. Marcus wasn't the kind of boy you expected to skip class. Quiet, polite, almost too polite, he barely spoke unless called on. Yet, there it was. Another absence without explanation. Some kids, she thought, had parents who didn't care if they showed up, but Marcus, something about him told her there was more. "Anyone know where Marcus is today?" she asked, her tone light, masking her curiosity. A couple of shrugs, a muttered "nope" from the front. One boy in the middle row, Jamal, smirked and said, "Probably just ditching." "Thank you, Jamal," she said, moving on with the list. But even as she taught the lesson on figurative language, her mind kept circling back to that empty desk. By lunchtime, Mrs. Carter couldn't shake it. She stepped into the teacher's lounge, sipping her coffee, and caught herself staring at the rain-streaked window. It was pouring outside now, the kind of cold, unrelenting rain that made the streets look mean. That's when she saw him. Marcus walking across the street, hoodie pulled tight, sneakers splashing through puddles. Not rushing, not late, just heading somewhere. She frowned. Why would a 14-year-old wander in this weather instead of sitting in a warm classroom? After school, she sat in her car for 10 minutes, debating. Then she started the engine and turned the wheel in the direction she'd seen him go. The streets narrowed, houses leaning into one another like tired old men. She spotted him again near the corner store, his hood still up, a small brown paper bag in his hand. He didn't see her. She followed at a distance as he crossed into a quieter block, finally stopping in front of an aging apartment building with a flickering hallway light visible through the glass. He glanced over his shoulder, then disappeared inside. Something about the way he looked around, and not guilty, not sneaky, but cautious, stuck with her. The next morning, Marcus showed up to class. Same quiet demeanor, same tucked-in shirt. She wanted to ask him where he'd been, but didn't. Not yet. Instead, she assigned group work, wandering the room as she watched him out of the corner of her eye. At one point, he caught her looking. His eyes lingered for just a second before darting back down to his paper. There was something in that glance, a mix of weariness and guardedness, that made her stomach tighten. By Friday, he was absent again. Mrs. Carter waited until after dismissal, then drove straight to that same apartment building. She parked, took a breath, and went inside. The hallway smelled faintly of old cooking oil and damp carpet. A woman in a faded robe shuffled past her without a word. She found the mailbox labeled Hill, Apton 3B, and climbed the stairs. When the door opened, it wasn't Marcus, but a frail-looking woman in her 40s, her hair tied back loosely, skin pale. "Yes?" the woman said, voice thin but polite. "Hi. I'm Mrs. Carter. I teach at Ridgeway Middle. I was wondering if Marcus is home." The woman hesitated, then opened the door wider. "He's, here. Come in." Inside, the apartment was small but tidy. A faint hum of an oxygen machine filled the silence. On the couch, Marcus sat with a blanket around his shoulders, a book in his lap. His eyes widened when he saw her. "Mrs. Carter," he said almost in a whisper. "I'm sorry to just drop by," she said gently. "I've been concerned. You've missed a few days." He glanced at the woman, his mother, she assumed, and then back at the book. "I'm fine. Just, stuff at home." Mrs. Carter looked at the oxygen machine, then at the pale woman beside it. She understood more than he realized. "I didn't mean to pry," she said softly. "But if there's something I can do—" "We're okay," Marcus interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. She nodded, respecting the wall he'd built. But as she left, the image of that boy sitting by his sick mother burned in her mind. The next week, Marcus was in school more often but always tired, his eyelids heavy. Once she caught him nodding off during a test. When she gently woke him, He whispered an apology that sounded like it came from somewhere much deeper than just missing sleep. One rainy Wednesday, she noticed his shoes. They were soaked through, the soles worn thin. When she asked if he wanted to leave them by the heater, he shook his head quickly as if afraid of drawing attention. It wasn't until 2 days later, when she left school late and saw him again walking in the opposite direction of his home, that she finally asked herself the question she'd been avoiding. What was Marcus doing out here? She followed again, careful to keep her distance. This time he stopped in front of a small laundromat. He pulled a heavy bag from his shoulder and went inside. Through the glass, she watched him load clothes into a washer, not just a few shirts, but a whole week's worth of laundry. Then he sat, pulled out a notebook, and started working on homework as the machines rumbled. When the cycle ended, he neatly folded everything and tucked it into the bag. She felt her throat tighten. This wasn't a boy skipping school for fun. That Friday, she asked him to stay after class. "I saw you the other day," she began carefully, "at the laundromat." His shoulders stiffened. "I'm not in trouble," she added quickly. "I just want to understand." He kept his gaze on the desk. "It's just stuff I have to do." "For your mom?" He looked up then, eyes wide, startled by her guess. "You don't have to explain," she said gently, "but I want you to know, I see how hard you're trying." For the first time, something in his expression cracked, the smallest flicker of relief, maybe even gratitude. But he didn't say more. Over the next week, Mrs. Carter found herself watching Marcus more closely. She noticed the way he sometimes winced when lifting his backpack, how he always turned down invitations to hang out after school, how his lunch was often nothing more than a peanut butter sandwich wrapped in wax paper. Then came the day that would change everything. It was Monday morning, grey skies pressing down on the school. Marcus wasn't in class again. Mrs. Carter felt that same old knot form in her stomach. But this time, instead of waiting, she left during her lunch break and drove to his building. When she knocked, there was no answer. She tried again, louder. Finally, she heard a faint voice from inside, Marcus's, calling, "Just a minute." The door opened, and there he was, breathing hard, hair damp with sweat. Behind him, the apartment was dim, the curtains drawn. "What's going on?" she asked, stepping inside before he could protest. That's when she saw his mother on the couch, pale and shivering, a blanket pulled up to her chin. "She's sick," Marcus said quickly. "It's just the flu. I'll take care of her." Mrs. Carter knelt by the couch, worry etching her features. The woman's breathing was shallow, her skin clammy. "Marcus," she said quietly, "she needs a doctor." He shook his head. We don't have—" He stopped himself, jaw tightening. In that moment, Mrs. Carter understood the full weight this boy had been carrying, and it broke something inside her. Mrs. Carter's mind raced. She could hear the faint hum of the oxygen machine, the shallow wheeze of Marcus's mother trying to breathe, the nervous shuffle of Marcus's feet on the worn carpet. "Marcus," she said, her voice steady but urgent. "This isn't just the flu. She needs proper care. If we wait, it could get worse." He stood in the doorway between the kitchen and living room, fists clenched, his eyes darting between his mother and his teacher. "We can't afford it," he said finally, his voice breaking just slightly. "We don't have insurance, and if I call someone, they'll take her away." "Take her away?" Mrs. Carter stepped closer, lowering her tone. "My aunt lives in another state. If they think my mom can't take care of me, they'll send me there." His chin trembled now, but he held himself stiff, as if sheer will could hold his world together. The silence between them stretched. Then Mrs. Carter took a deep breath. "Marcus, listen to me. I'm not here to judge or take anyone away. I just want to help." He shook his head again, slower this time. "People say that, but they don't mean it. They come in, they look around, and then everything changes. I can't let that happen." She wanted to tell him she understood, but the truth was, she didn't. Not fully. She didn't know what it was like to be 14, holding your entire life together with nothing but 2 hands and hope. So she tried something else. "You've been missing school to take care of her, haven't you?" His eyes met hers, unflinching now. "If I don't, who will?" It was the simplest, most heartbreaking answer she had ever heard. She left that afternoon with his promise that he'd call if things got worse. But as she sat in her car, The image of his small frame standing between his sick mother and the rest of the world made her stomach ache. The next morning, Marcus wasn't in class again. Mrs. Carter didn't hesitate this time. She called in for a substitute, grabbed her coat and headed straight to the Hill apartment. When Marcus opened the door, there was no argument, no quick excuses, just tired eyes and a muttered, "She's worse." Mrs. Carter stepped inside, kneeling by his mother again. "I'm calling someone," she said, pulling out her phone. Marcus's voice shot up an octave. "No, please." "Marcus," she interrupted gently, "you can't do this alone. Let me help you. Let me help her." He froze. Then, slowly, he nodded. Within half an hour, paramedics were in the apartment, speaking calmly to Marcus, assuring him that his mother would be taken to the hospital for proper treatment. He stood stiffly by the doorway, watching them lift her onto a stretcher, his hands gripping the fabric of his hoodie so tightly his knuckles turned white. Mrs. Carter stayed with him until the sirens faded into the distance. That afternoon she drove him to the hospital. In the waiting room, surrounded by the antiseptic smell and low murmur of voices, Marcus sat with his head down, elbows on his knees. "She's going to be okay," she said softly. He nodded, but his jaw was tight. "I should have done more." "You've done more than most adults could," she said firmly. "You kept her safe until help came. You've been doing everything." For the first time, she saw him swallow back tears. He turned away, blinking fast. 2 days later, his mother was stable, hooked up to fluids and medication, color slowly returning to her cheeks. When Marcus saw her smile faintly at him, he let out a breath he'd been holding for weeks. Mrs. Carter arranged for a school counselor to discreetly connect them with community resources, meal programs, transportation vouchers, and a nurse who could visit his mother at home. None of it came with the threat of splitting them apart. When Marcus returned to school, he didn't just slip into his seat unnoticed. That day, Mrs. Carter called him up to her desk as the others filed out for lunch. "I wanted to say thank you," she said. He looked confused. "For what?" "For reminding me why I became a teacher. You've been carrying so much and you still showed up. For your mom. For yourself. That takes more courage than most people ever find." He didn't answer, but she noticed the way his shoulders straightened just a little as he walked out the door. Weeks passed. Marcus's attendance improved. He started handing in assignments early, even raising his hand in class now and then. The deep circles under his eyes began to fade. Then one Friday afternoon, just before the final bell, he lingered at his desk as the room emptied. "My mom wanted me to give you this," he said, sliding a small envelope toward her. Inside was a handwritten note on lined paper. "Thank you for seeing my son." Mrs. Carter read it twice, her throat tightening, her vision blurring just enough that she had to set it down. She looked up at Marcus. "Tell her she's welcome, and tell her I see you too." For a moment, the quiet boy who had skipped school so many times just to keep his world from falling apart allowed himself to smile. It was small, almost shy, but it was real. The truth was, Marcus hadn't been skipping to run from something. He'd been skipping to hold on to everything that mattered, and when someone finally took the time to look closer, to ask without judging, they found a boy who wasn't failing school, he was saving his family. Mrs. Carter never forgot that, and every time she took attendance after that, she thought of Marcus Hill, and how sometimes the bravest kids are the ones whose battles you can't see. Sometimes skipping school isn't about avoiding responsibility. Sometimes it's about carrying more than your share, and sometimes all it takes is one person noticing to change everything. Because when you see someone struggle, you have a choice, to walk away or to step in. And the choice you make could be the thing they remember for the rest of their life. If you were moved by this story, subscribe to Das Black Saga for more powerful, life-changing stories that will stay with you long after they end.